In this tutorial, I will show you how to draw the golden rectangle and spiral as shown on screen. Make sure you have customized your interface so that it shows you the coordinates and also dynamic input. Also make sure that you have set your object snaps to at least endpoint, midpoint, and intersection. To begin, click on the Start tab. Click on the down arrow for New and select the AutoCAD template. If you do not see it listed there, go ahead and click on Browse Templates and select the AutoCAD template from this window and click Open. The next thing to do is save the drawing file. Click on the Application button and click on Save. Navigate to the folder where you will be saving your drawing files and type in the file name. Click Save. Next, format the units. Type Units and enter. The length type will be architectural. The precision will be 1/32. The angle type is decimal degrees, and the precision is to the nearest hundredth of a degree. Click OK. I'm going to begin by drawing a square that is 6 inches. It will start at the point of origin, which is the 0, 0 location identified by the UCS icon. I'm going to pan my drawing area so that the UCS icon is closer to the center of my screen. I will now begin to draw my lines to establish the 6-inch square. From the Home tab, Draw Panel, I click on Line. For the first point, it needs to begin at x equals 0, y equals 0. So I type in 0, 0, and enter. I need to draw a straight line. In order to do so, I need to turn on what is called ortho mode. So I come down to my status bar, hover over the icon that reads ortho mode, and click it to activate. I can now draw straight lines. The first line I'm going to draw is a horizontal line, and it's going to be 6 inches in length, so I type in 6 and enter. The next line is a vertical line, 6 inches in length. So I moved my cursor up and I type in 6 and enter. I continue with the horizontal line. I move my cursor to the left and I type in a value of 6 and enter. And then I go down to my command line and I click on Close so that I can close my lines. And that terminates the command. I'm now going to pan and zoom to place this closer to the center of my screen. I have my square, and now I need to establish the golden rectangle. If I go back to my example, the distance from the midpoint to this corner is the length that I need. So I'm going to draw a circle and establish that length. I'll go back to my drawing and I will draw a circle. From the Home tab, Draw Panel, I hover over the icon and I will be able to draw a center radius circle. I click on the icon. I'm prompted to specify the center point for the circle, and it will be the midpoint of this line. I click on it. I'm going to go back to my status bar and turn off ortho mode by clicking on it. I'm going to pick this endpoint as the radius. Panning my drawing to the center of the screen so I could see it better. I now need to extend this line to my circle. So from the Home tab, Modify Panel, I click on the down arrow next to the Trim icon, and I select Extend. I need to select the object to extend. I click on the line. I do not need to extend any more objects, so I right-click and Enter to terminate the command. This establishes the length that I need for the ratio of my golden rectangle. I no longer need the circle, so I can erase it. So from the Home tab, Modify Panel, I click on the Erase icon. I select my object, which is the circle, and then I right-click. That erases the circle and terminates the command. I need to add a line from this endpoint going up. Instead of drawing the line, I'm going to introduce a new command, and it's the Copy command. So from the Home tab, Modify Panel, I click on Copy. I'm prompted to select the objects to copy. I only want to copy one line, so I click on it. That is the only object I'd like to copy, so I don't want to select any more, so I'm going to right-click. And now I'm prompted to specify the base point. I select this endpoint, and I copy it over to this endpoint. I do not wish to make any more copies, so I will right-click and Enter to terminate the command. I can now extend this line to this endpoint. But instead of using the Extend command, I'm going to introduce grips. I'm going to select the line by clicking on it, and I have 3 grip points, one at each endpoint and one in the midpoint. I'm going to hover over this grip point and click on it, and I can now stretch that endpoint and bring it over to this endpoint. And I click on it, and I have completed the stretch. To remove the grips and deselect the line, I tap the Escape key. I can now continue and draw the additional lines to represent these squares, and I will show you in the example the additional squares that are needed. I'm going to use the Offset command in order to establish the exact length that I need so that I can offset this line down and establish the square shape. From the Home tab, Modify Panel, I select Offset. I need to specify the offset distance, and that distance is going to be from this endpoint to this endpoint. That establishes the distance to offset. I now have to select the object to offset. I select the line, and I specify the point on the side to offset, which is below the line. Anywhere below the line will do. I click, and the line is offset. I can now right-click and Enter to terminate the command. I will now trim the line. Home tab, Modify Panel, drop down next to Extend, and select Trim. And I'll click on the segment to trim. Right-click to terminate the command. Select Enter. And I will continue. Going back to my example, I need a square in this location. So I'll use the offset command again to establish the correct distance. I can right-click, hover over recent input, and select from previous or recent commands that I've used. The one I need right now is the offset command, so I click on it. I need to specify the distance between 2 points. So I select this point, which is the end point, and my second point, which is this end point. That establishes the distance that I need. I can now select the object to offset. I select the line, and I select the side to offset, which is here. I can now right-click to terminate the command, and click Enter. And I can use the trim command, but I would also like to go back and show you how I can use grips to stretch the line. So I'll click on the line. It shows me the grip points. I hover over the end point here and select that grip point. I can now stretch it down and let it find the intersection. When I see that it has found the intersection, I can click and the line has been stretched. I tap the Escape key to remove the grips, and I can continue. Back to my example, I need to draw a square in this location. I'm going to zoom in and pan. I will right-click, hover over recent input, and select Offset. I need to establish the distance, so I select this endpoint as my first point, and this endpoint as my second point. And now I can select the line and offset it up here. I will now right-click, Enter to terminate the command. I will right-click, hover over recent input, and select Trim. And trim the line at these 2 points, one here and one here. Right-click, Enter to terminate the command. I'll go back to my example. The next square that I need to draw is in this location. I will right-click, hover over recent input, and select Offset. To specify the offset distance, I select this endpoint as my first point, and this endpoint as my second point. I select the object to offset, which is this line, and I select on the right-hand side of the line. Right-click and Enter to terminate the command. I'll pan this down and zoom so I can see the line segment, and then I can right-click, hover over recent input, and select Trim, and trim out the line so that I have my square. I'll right-click and Enter to terminate the command. I'll zoom into this area, which will be my focus, pan it, go back to my example, and this is the square that I wish to draw. Right-click, hover over recent input, and select Offset. This is my first point, and this is my second point. I now select the line, and offset to the bottom. Right-click, enter to terminate the command. Right-click, hover over recent input, and trim. Right-click, enter to terminate the command. This completes the lines I need to draw for my golden rectangle. I would now like to see the extent of my drawing. I can go over to my nav bar and I can select Zoom Extents. By clicking on it, it shows me the extent of my drawing. I can also type Z, enter for zoom, and type E for the option to zoom to the extents. If you do not see the nav bar on the side, so for example, if I close it, if it's not there, you simply type in nav bar, enter, and you turn it on. I will proceed to draw the arcs. In my example, you'll see that the arcs are constructed in a counterclockwise direction by default. This arc here, if I select it, you'll see that it shows the center point at this endpoint. My start point will be here, and my end point will be there. So I go back to my example, and from the Home tab Draw panel, Arc, drop down, I want to select the option that allows me to pick the center, start, and end. So I click here. My start point, or rather the center point of the arc, is going to be at this end point. My start point is here, and my end point will be this end point. So I click on it. That's how I can draw my first arc. And I'll proceed to repeat the 3-point arc command. And if I right-click and I select recent input and I select arc from here, you'll notice that it wants to begin with a start point. So I cannot use this option. So I'm going to right-click and cancel, and I will go back to my Home tab, Draw panel, and make sure that I can select Start, Center, End again. So I'll click on that. The center point is here. For my start point, because I know that by default it goes in a counterclockwise direction, I will select this endpoint and take it up in this direction. You'll see that the command automatically terminates. I'll go back to the icon, and this time I can hover over it because it has now defaulted to center, start, end. So I can click on the icon and come over here. I can zoom in, pick this as my center point, and if I accidentally select this point as my start point, you'll notice how it wants to draw the arc in a counterclockwise direction. But if you look at the command line, it indicates that I can hold down the Control key to switch that direction. So even though I made a mistake here, I can rectify it by holding down the Control key and construct the arc in the clockwise direction. So I can click and I can continue. I'll zoom in so I can see what I'm doing. Go back and select Center, Start, End. Here is my center point. This is my start point. And again, I can hold down the Control key if I accidentally selected the wrong endpoint to begin. And I can click here, and I'll continue. And I'll zoom in, draw an arc again, center, start, end. This is the center point. This is my start point, and this is my end point. Repeating again, clicking on Center, Start, End for my arc. Here's my center point, start point, end point. If I go back to my example, I have completed the spiral. I'd like to see the entire drawing, so I'll go to my nav bar and I will click on Zoom Extents. And I'll zoom out just a little bit so I can see my full drawing. This completes the drawing. I will now click on Save. And the next step is going to be to print out a PDF of this file. To print this drawing file, I'll go to the Application button, I'll click on it, hover down on Print, and hover over and click on Plot. I have a message notifying me that it wants to do a batch plot. I will click on Continue to plot a single sheet. And what I will do is I'm going to click on this checkbox so that it does not show this to me again. So I'll continue to plot a single sheet. Here are the settings. For the printer, I'm going to select AutoCAD PDF, General Documentation. For the paper size, ANSI 8.5 by 11 is fine. For the plot area, I'm going to select Extents. I'd like to center the plot. And instead of fitting the paper, I'm going to turn that off. And I'd like to set this to a scale of 1:1, which is actual size. For my plot style table, I will select Monochrome. And I'll assign this plot to all layouts. I can now preview my plot. And it shows that it will not exactly fit onto this sheet size. So I'm going to close my preview and make some adjustments. For the paper size, I'm going to see if there's a different size that allows what is called a full bleed. And you'll see it right here that it says ANSI A full bleed 8.5 by 11. So I select that one. And now if I preview, you'll see that it does fit onto the sheet. I'm going to right click and exit. Reviewing my settings one last time, and now that everything looks to be correct, I will apply it to the layout, and I will now click OK. And I'd like to save my file. You'll note that it's adding model to the name, and that is because we are in the Model tab. But I'd like to remove that. So I'm going to navigate in the text box and remove it so that it only shows my first initial last name and the appropriate file name. And I'll go ahead and save this. It has printed the project, and I can now open that and show you what it looks like. And here's the drawing. I've opened it up in Adobe Acrobat Pro. I'll close the bookmarks. If I hover down here towards the corner, you'll see that it is an 11 by 8.5 inch drawing, and this is printed to actual size. And the next step would be to upload this to the proper folders as instructed. here are the settings. For the printer, I'm going to select AutoCAD PDF, General Documentation. For the paper size, ANSI 8.5 by 11 is fine. For the plot area, I'm going to select Extents. I'd like to center the plot, and instead of fitting the paper, I'm going to turn that off, and I'd like to set this to a scale of 1:1, which is actual size. For my plot style table, I will select Monochrome, and I'll assign this plot to all layouts. I can now preview my plot, and it shows that it will not exactly fit onto this sheet size. So I'm going to close my preview and make some adjustments. For the paper size, I'm going to see if there's a different size that allows what is called a full bleed. And you'll see it right here that it says ANSI full bleed 8.5 by 11. So I select that one. And now if I preview, you'll see that it does fit onto the sheet. I'm going to right click and exit. Reviewing my settings one last time, and now that everything looks to be correct, I will apply it to the layout, and I will now click OK. I'll navigate to my folder, and I'd like to save my file. You'll note that it's adding model to the name, and that is because we are in the Model tab. But I'd like to remove that. So I'm going to navigate in the text box and remove it so that it only shows my first initial last name and the appropriate file name. And I'll go ahead and save this. It has printed the project, and I can now open that and show you what it looks like. And here's the drawing. I've opened it up in Adobe Acrobat Pro. I'll close the bookmarks. If I hover down here and towards the corner, you'll see that it is an 11 by 8.5 inch drawing, and this is printed to actual size. And the next step would be to upload this to the proper folders as instructed.